Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 Ark creatures that have really annoying taming methods. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really does help the channel. In at number 10 is the Archaeopteryx. Now this thing definitely isn't really too much of an annoyance in terms of its taming method. It just spawns in a really annoying area, and also this thing just has a very weird taming food as well. You literally have to feed this thing chitin. This thing, in my opinion, just has a really annoying taming method, as somehow whenever I'm taming one of these things, for whatever reason I actually tame one of these things, I always end up messing it up miserably. And also, once you have got this thing tamed, it isn't really even worth having one, because the glide suit exists now. Before the glide suit existed, this thing may have been very viable for you. But now the glide suit exists, these things really are not worth the tame, and for me, they are just really, really annoying. In at number 9 is the Basilosaurus. Now, in my opinion, this may not be the same for you, but I just really, really hate passive tames. Passive tames are literally the bane of my Ark playing. Especially around a Basilosaurus in the wild, you will find loads of mantas. And mantas are an absolute pain. The worst part of taming a Basilo is definitely luring all of those mantas away and finding a way to either lose them or dispose of them. And sometimes that just takes absolutely ages. And on top of all of that, the Basilosaurus tame does take a while on top of that as well. Passive tames are definitely not fast. And I would argue that a knockout tame is significantly faster than a passive tame. When you have tamed a Basilosaurus though, these things are incredibly useful, and I do think every Ark player at some point should tame themselves a Basilosaurus. These things are absolutely legendary. They are by far the best creature for doing underwater caves, as they are immune to electric eels and jellyfish, which is a godsend. In at number 8 is the Arthropluera. Now for me, the Arthropluera is a completely useless tame. I have absolutely no use for this tame at all, but if you play PvP on Ark, the Arthropluera is a great shout and definitely a tame worth taming. But it is definitely an annoying tame which you really shouldn't underestimate. It is a passive tame as well, where you will feed this thing spoiled meat, you'll need bug repellent, and you'll need ghillie. But the thing is, where Arthropluera spawn, there are loads and loads of other hostile creatures. But I would say Raasclark is the go-to map for taming these things, as on the island, they only spawn in caves, and you really do not want to be taming one of these things in caves, as it is pretty much bound to go wrong unless you kill every other creature in the cave, which simply isn't viable. But in terms of the mantis' use in PvP, these things can destroy any type of structure. Yes, even tech. But the thing is about this creature, which makes it even better for PvP, it is small and easy to get around. In at number 7 is the Bloodstalker. This was definitely a much bigger issue in terms of taming back when Genesis Part 1 came out, but now that the Desmodus exists, blood packs are so much easier to obtain now, and the Bloodstalker tame isn't as annoying as it used to be. But if you are just playing on Genesis Part 1, the Bloodstalker can still be a very annoying tame, and a Desmodus isn't an easy tame in itself either, so it is definitely a task to get all of those blood bags, especially if you are taming a high level. It could even take thousands of blood bags if you're playing on official and you're trying to tame a max level 150. But once you have got a Bloodstalker tamed, these things are by far some of the best traveling creatures in Ark. Obviously, the Maywing is a lot better than the Bloodstalker for any kind of traveling, but the Bloodstalker is, in my opinion, a lot more satisfying to use than the Maywing, even though it does require a bit more skill to control, as the Maywing is actually quite simple in its controls. It still takes a while to learn, but if you compare the Bloodstalker to something like the gas bag, this thing is much, much easier to control, and also Genesis Part 1 really rewards you for learning those skills, as there are many missions where you will need a Bloodstalker, and there are also Bloodstalker race missions on Genesis Part 1 as well. So if you want some quick, easy hexagons, then actually if you are good at flying a Bloodstalker, it might not actually be a bad shout to learn how to fly a Bloodstalker, and then you will be able to combat those missions really easily and get all of those necessary hexagons. In at number 6 is the Basilisk. Now I'm sure by now you know how the Basilisk is tamed, and it is definitely an annoying one which you should not underestimate. You will need eggs such as a rock drake egg, a magmasaur egg, or I think wyvern eggs work too. And essentially after you have those eggs, what you need to do is from a higher position where it is not aggro to you, you need to drop the eggs above it, and then it will keep eating those eggs, and then eventually at some point after many eggs that is eaten, you will tame yourself a Basilisk. And this is definitely a tame worth taming. They are reasonably fast, they do insane amounts of damage, and I'm pretty sure their second attack even does torpor. And they are actually quite good base defense as well, as you can bury them into the ground and store items if you needed to do that. Or for the unsuspecting PvP raider of your base, you can have one nicely positioned outside. In at number 5 is the Astrodelphis. This is definitely a new Arc creature in the grand scheme of things. Yes, it is 2 years old now, but I still classify it as a newer Arc creature, as it is not pre-extinction, I would say. It's kind of new Arc creature stage things. But either way, if you were wondering how to tame one of these things, the Astrodelphis on paper seems like a very simple tame. You simply pet it and then feed it element. That may seem like a really easy task, but trust me, the Astrodelphis is definitely not an easy task to tame at all. The element definitely does take a lot of time to gather, not really on Genesis Part 2, but it will still be a bit of an inconvenience. But mainly that petting cycle and it running away and then you feeding it element can be really annoying, as the space biome on Gen 2 has many creatures like the void worms, which can really mess up your tame, and the Astrodelphis itself can just mess up the tame, as in some cases Astrodelphises may get too hostile and you'll just get knocked around and they may bite you and attack you, especially when they come in packs. It can be really hard just to get near one, as like a Diplo would do, they just keep knocking you and kind of playing you around and stopping you from getting anywhere close to them. Once you have one tamed, they are absolutely insane. In at number 4 is the Golem. This thing has a very simple tame, again on paper, and its tame method is pretty much the same as the next creature on the list, except the next creature is a little bit harder to tame. The Rock Golem, simply put, you just have to shoot cannons right into this thing's face. And actually that is a little bit of an issue, as cannons aren't very easy to control on Arc, which makes it really annoying, and also a Rock Golem head is pretty small for a cannon to actually hit. It's like the Titanosaur tame. Yes, it may seem quite easy to just shoot a cannon directly into its face, but this is a moving target. Yes, you can trap it, but it will still move in some cases and attack and kind of move itself out of the way a bit. This is not as simple as it seems on paper. But once you do have one of these things tamed, they are insane creatures on Scorched Earth and any map, really. They are great PvP tames, definitely a very valuable creature that deals a lot of damage. But just as a quick note, you also are not going to feed these things meat. Don't do it, feed them rocks. In at number 3 is the Astrocetus. This is tamed the exact same way as the Rock Golem is, and the way you do that is by shooting cannons directly into its face. Yes, a Astrocetus face is a lot bigger than a Rock Golem, but with the zero gravity where these things spawn on Genesis Part 1 and their general higher mobility than a Rock Golem and a different dimension you have to deal with, as you were taming these things in the air, they can definitely be a lot more difficult than a rock golem to tame. Unless obviously you have the tech hover skiff, then it may be a little bit easier for you. But these things, even when knocked out, are still a difficult tame on top of that as well. They take a lot of resources to tame, and they also take a lot of time and a lot of narcotics just to keep them asleep. Once tamed, you have yourself an absolute hunking beast of a PvP creature. In at number 2 is the Rhyniognatha. Actually, this is Ark's most recent addition to the game, and if you haven't heard of it before, essentially this thing is an insect that will spawn in any swamp biome on the island or on the Lost Island, and those locations are on screen currently. But you may think, well, surely it's not that bad to tame, right? It's just a simple knockout tame. But actually this thing has a very long and laborious taming method, and actually if you did want to check it out, I do have a full video guide on how to tame yourself a Rhyniognatha, so if you are struggling, I will link that in a card on the top of the screen right now. But as a quick summary, you are going to want to know how to tame yourself a Rhyniognatha. But before I talk about that, I'm going to talk about what makes this creature so great as a creature, and also personally why I think you should tame yourself a Rhyniognatha as soon as possible. The Rhyniognatha is an extremely great flyer and is extremely useful for you to tame. Also, it just deals an amazing amount of damage, and it really is a great companion in Ark. Also, if you were just looking at the actual video there, you would have seen a glance at the steps to tame a Rhyniognatha. You're going to need to find yourself a male Rhyniognatha, then you'll need to kill it and get its pheromone. Then you're going to need to find yourself a female Rhyniognatha, preferably net gun it or trap it in some kind of way, and get it to the lowest amount of health possible without killing it. Obviously this does really help if you do have awesome spyglass, but if you do not have access to mods, if you're on console, or if you just like to play vanilla, you can always use the magnifying glass. Then once that is done, feed the pheromone to your Bronto. Sorry, I didn't mention that you need yourself a Bronto. Then at some point when the Rhyniognatha is out of the net gun, it is going to impregnate your creature, and then from there you will need to go through the hunger timers, which will require all the resources which were on screen about a minute ago, and then you would have tamed yourself a Rhyniognatha. And finally, in at number 1 is the Armaga. These things are an absolutely annoying tame. Essentially what you need to do is hunt around with these creatures, and they will hunt with you. But the catch is you can only hunt hostile creatures to actually gain that taming effectiveness, and this can go wrong on so many levels, and it is such an annoying tame that it really just, there is no way to get around it. It is just so annoying. It takes so much time. It even took Raasclark, a reasonably good Ark player, 24 hours. Yes, a whole 24 hours just to tame one of these things. They are definitely insanely difficult tames. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. Did you agree? If you didn't, comment your top 10 in the comments down below, and I will see you all later. Bye.